Thank you for staying with us and welcome to Network Africa on Channels Television. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Coming up on the program today, we'll be talking about the second time in a month that Egypt has delivered consignments of military equipment to Ethiopia, as well as the ongoing 79th UN General Assembly in New York and the migrant crisis involving the bodies of 30 decomposing people on a boat in Senegal. But we begin in Egypt, where a ship has delivered a consignment of military equipment to Somalia, the second time it's done so this month, as relations deteriorate between Somalia and its neighbor and former close ally Ethiopia. In a social media post, Somalia Defense Minister Abdul Qadir Mohammed Nur thanked Egypt without specifically mentioning the weapons, adding that Somalia has passed a stage where they were dictated to and awaited the affirmation of others on who it will engage with. The military cargo includes anti-aircraft guns and artillery. Egypt, a longtime rival of Ethiopia, has taken the opportunity to move closer to Somalia, stoking concerns about rising tensions in the Horn of Africa. Ethiopia has for years been a staunch backer of the government in Mogadishu in its fight against Al-Qaeda-linked militant group Al-Shabaab. Ethiopia has expressed concern at the arrival of the weapons in Mogadishu, saying it could exacerbate the security situation in Somalia. The VOA's Edward Yeranian is in Egypt, from where he joins us. Edward, great to see you. And let's talk about this cozying up of relations, cozying up of Egypt to Somalia. What have analysts said about it?
Well, I think the standard line is that Egypt and Ethiopia are at loggerheads over this Renaissance dam on the Nile. And the old adage goes, the friend of my enemy is my friend. So I guess Egypt has an interest in cozying up to Somalia, and Ethiopia has an interest in cozying up to Somaliland.
Indeed. And Ethiopia is not very happy about this consignment from Egypt because it says it could exacerbate the security situation in Somalia. But how so?
I think it's debatable, really. I think it's a question of sovereignty more than anything else. Somalia, if you consider it a stable country, which most people don't, claims the area called Somaliland, and they would not sign a deal with Ethiopia giving them a piece of the coastline. That being said, Somaliland was a country, or was a protectorate when the British were there, so it did have a separate independent history. And Ethiopia is landlocked, and it also used to have a coastline before Eritrea became independent. So it's a matter of sovereignty, and it's a question of who has a right to be independent and who doesn't. I don't know anyone has resolved that issue, really.
Yeah, and Ethiopia does recognize Somaliland existence and the formation of it, but does it recognize the governments there?
I don't know that they formally have. I guess they're dealing with the government there, or whatever passes for a government there. It's difficult to recognize a government when you don't have an officially recognized independent state. So I guess they're just dealing with it more than anything else. And maybe they have, on paper, agreed to recognize the government in return for this piece of the coastline that was offered to them some months ago.
Could you tell us if there have been any reactions to this military consignment, a significant consignment from Egypt, in Egypt itself and also in Ethiopia?
Surprisingly little in Egypt. I think most Egyptians are mostly concerned about the Nile and the dispute with Ethiopia because they're concerned they're going to run out of water at some point, and that dispute has not really been settled. And so I think strategically most people kind of understand, or at least people who are educated understand, that Egypt would have a reason to want to make some sort of deal with Somalia.
Now, I'm figuring out that the reason for this consignment is targeted at dealing with the Al-Shabaab militants, and they have been a source of worry for Somalia as well as surrounding countries because of their affiliation now with the Al-Qaeda militant group itself. Could you talk a bit more about how much of a bother it has been in recent years? There was a time Somalia was considered a failing state because of the influence that Al-Shabaab exerted across the country. I mean, it was only in Mogadishu that the government could exist. What exists now for Somalia?
Well, the point I would make to start with after 40 years, 37 years in the Middle East is it's really difficult to say who is supporting these so-called terrorist groups, which countries hiding in the shadows, supporting other groups which are supporting these groups. And I can trace it because I've seen Somalis that were shipped to Libya by Qatar and Turkey. So, you know, I don't know who is, I wouldn't want to say who is behind these groups, but yes, they are a pain in the butt. And I think that they are deliberately designed to be a pain. And the countries, probably major countries that support these groups indirectly using proxies like Qatar and Turkey, would like to see some measure of instability. I don't know why. Maybe because of the coastline. They want to have some control of the coastline themselves by putting UN forces there. I mean, it's debatable what their motives are, but there are other major countries that are supporting these terrorist groups, and the Shabab is certainly one of those terrorist groups, and it is a real nuisance. It has been a nuisance to the neighboring countries as well as Somalia over the last, I don't know, at least a decade that I know of.
Edward, thank you so much for joining us on the program today.
My pleasure, Amarat.
To our coverage now of the 79th UN General Assembly. Nigeria's participation has recorded some success, especially on Monday, as the Tinubu administration's commitment towards mortgage refinancing and women empowerment received the support of the United States Chamber of Commerce with a commitment of about $320 million. It comes as Vice President Kashim Shettima, who is leading the federal government's delegation and representing President Tinubu at this year's UNGA, met with other members of Nigeria's delegation to re-strategize the country's engagements in New York. At a U.S.-Nigeria Executive Business Roundtable hosted by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Nisha Biswal of the American International Development Finance Corporation announced that with a portfolio of $1 billion, it was investing $200 million in mortgage refinancing in Nigeria. Some of the $100 million has been earmarked for FCMB to finance SMEs in Nigeria with particular interest in women empowerment. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce also announced that $20 million has been approved for a firm, robust international for processing of cashew nuts in Nigeria. She also said the American Chamber remains committed to working with Nigerians in the development and pursuit of sustainable economic policies. In other news, from the United Nations General Assembly, the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet Leadership Council met on the sidelines of the Assembly at the Rockefeller Foundation. Discussion centered on the Mission 300 Challenge, a bold initiative to bring electricity to 300 million people by the year 2030. President of the World Bank, Ajay Banga, and President of the African Development Bank, Akiwumi Additional, are driving the conversation with a focus on revolutionizing energy access in Africa and beyond.
Point is that I think Ajay said it. Development is about dignity, right? And there's no dignity when you don't have electricity. You know, you take a look at Africa today. You got 3 people, 16% of global population, 3% of the global electricity access, only 6% of the global energy access. Energy is all about how you actually grow economies. It's how you actually invest in industries. It's how you actually create jobs, right? So you cannot really grow global economy without energy. In any case, with Africa just being 2% of that, 3% of that, it means Africa's participation in the global economy will continue to be low. And Africa cannot be at the bottom of the global value chain. You cannot industrialize in the dark. You can't grow in the dark. You can't do that. And so this is fundamental to Africa's growth, development, competitiveness globally. Now, when it comes to the issue of what the numbers are, it's alarming. You know, we have today, the numbers we use to pan around is that it's 600 million people without access to electricity. I think those numbers are actually quite on the low end, because with COVID, rising inflation, with a lot of poverty, many more people that are actually using electricity are now using coal and other things. So that number has actually gone up quite significantly. So the issue that we must therefore say is, what must we do? We need a quantum leap.
Welcome back. You're still watching Network Africa on Channels Television. One of the most notorious prisons in the Democratic Republic of Congo has released over 1,500 seriously ill inmates in its latest move to tackle overcrowding. The release began at Mekelle Prison in the capital Kinshasa on Sunday. It was there at the beginning of the month that 129 prisoners died in an attempted jailbreak. Security forces shot some dead, while others were killed in a crush. The government pledged to speed up its plans to decongest the prison, where conditions have been described as true hell. Authorities say those who need medical attention would be treated, while the government will provide buses to send others home. Kinshasa has 2 jails for a population of at least 14 million people. In addition to Mekelle, the military prison of Ndole has an official capacity of 500. At least 30 decomposing bodies have been found on a boat off the coast of Senegal. On Monday, the Navy received a tip-off of a vessel that was adrift about 70 kilometers from the capital, Dakar. They brought the wooden canoe or pirogue into port on Monday morning. According to authorities, the advanced state of decomposition of the bodies is making recovery, identification, and transfer operations an extremely delicate procedure. Some Senegalese fishermen say surviving by fishing has become difficult due to competition from foreign trawlers off the coast, causing an increase in migration and people smuggling. Investigations are underway to determine when and where the boat departed and how many people are on board. Well, industry players and leaders in exports trade across the continent have preferred strategies for strengthening and expanding the export sector in Nigeria and the continent. The main focus of the Export Roundtable was to dissect Nigeria and Africa at large, how they can better capitalize on the vast potential of export trade.
Exporters are always faced with the challenge of dealing with international buyers, with many of them often preferring to engage in local businesses where their money can be tracked easily. That's why the 2024 edition of the Export Business Roundtable has convened industry players and trade stakeholders to explore how Nigeria can better position itself in the global export market.
From personal experience,
Through insightful presentations and discussions, participants here identified actionable solutions to boost Nigeria's competitiveness on the global stage.
the biggest single most important problem holding us back, not just here on the export, in fact, everything about business is what? Cooperation. There is nowhere in the world where you succeed in export unless when you are doing it as a lone person. Exporting is about cooperation and collaboration.
For us as Nigerian Customs Service, we have since recognized that much as we cherish our contributions to the national economy through the collection of tax on imports, we have seen that the future of the country depends solely on exports. You can only measure your level of development by the volume of exports that you have been able to achieve.
DGC and Maple, we are ready to bridge the gap of exports, as we're exporting our goods and services as far as Nigeria of today is concerned. Our mission is to help Nigeria and help Nigerians to participate in the global business of exports.
Organizers underscore the need for enhanced cooperation and collaboration between the government and private sector to unlock new opportunities for Nigerian businesses abroad.
The key element in export is cooperation, coordination, and effective effort to make sure that we achieve our collective effort, promoting made in Nigerian goods and then made in African goods, so that we can be able to compete favorably like Milan.
Certain documentations are duplicated, which is not required. We're in a hurry to export. The reason you see China today doing very well is that every household is an exporter. You must export non-oil products.
Participants also highlighted the importance of shifting focus from raw material exports to value-added goods, which they believe is key to driving economic growth and sustainable development. The roundtable concluded with strong commitments to fostering public-private partnerships and creating an enabling environment for experts to thrive.
The South African Police Service, SAPS, has arrested a 30-year-old female who released more than 63 pellets suspected to be cocaine, the value of which the service could not immediately determine. SAPS released a video reportedly showing the pellets of suspected cocaine, which they had retrieved from the body of the suspected drug mule at Roundtable International Airport in Johannesburg on Monday. The police also released an X-ray image, which they said confirmed and detected foreign objects in the stomach of the arrested individual. A statement from the SAPS identifies the suspect as Namibian, who arrived in South Africa from Sao Paulo, Brazil.
These are some of the suspected drugs that have been released by the drug mule that was arrested at Roundtable Airport on Sunday morning. The SAPS was following up on intelligence that a drug mule would arrive from Sao Paulo, from Brazil to South Africa, carrying suspected cocaine. The team immediately intercepted this particular suspect. She was taken to a local hospital where she was given a medication to release some of these drugs. So far, she has released more than 63 of these bullets suspected to be cocaine. She is under police guard and police are monitoring her. Police cannot rule out the possibility that she is working with a bigger and larger syndicate. The National Commissioner of the SAPS has applauded the vigilance of the multidisciplinary team at the Roundtable Airport, who continue to clamp down on all forms of criminality. In the last 2 months, the team at Roundtable have intercepted and arrested 10 drug mules and have seized and confiscated more than 13 million worth of drugs. The value of these drugs cannot be estimated at this particular stage, as the process to release them from the suspect's body is still underway.
We're still in South Africa, where an American woman who disappeared while hiking on Table Mountain has been found dead. Brooke Chevron, a student from North Carolina, was in Cape Town doing an internship at an NGO. The 20-year-old student was reported missing on Saturday after a tracking app she was using while on a solo hike stopped updating and she could not be reached. Her friends called the police when there were no updates on her tracking app and they could not contact her by phone. Her body was recovered on Sunday in a mountainous area near Table Mountain known as Devil's Peak. We're ending in South Africa. The Nigerian High Commission in Pretoria recently hosted its first hybrid webinar focused on women empowerment in exports and trade under the theme Unlocking Global Markets. The event has brought together hundreds of businesswomen from both countries, with some joining in person and virtually. Our correspondent, Innocent Samosa, has more.
The discourse here is centered around unlocking global markets, bringing together Nigerian and South African businesswomen under one roof to seek opportunities for growth and expansion. The acting Nigerian High Commission in Pretoria, Ambassador Alexandra Temitope Ajayi, talks us through the idea behind the event.
So today's event, which is a webinar essentially on getting access to women into global opportunities that are bound in business sphere. We are potentially looking at a situation where we can get the South African women, business women, entrepreneurs, and Nigerian women entrepreneurs to be talking, because we discovered that there has been some lacuna, a kind of gap between these two entities, you understand? So we want to see as a way of enhancing the bilateral relations between the two countries.
Channels Television spoke to some attendees who said it is important for African women, especially from Nigeria and South Africa, to engage in global trade.
Being a Nigerian who farms and works here in South Africa, and also being a Nigerian who also likes the businesses in Nigeria, we're looking for a way to. The important thing is that we need to grow as women, and women need to be involved. But believe me, when you give a woman an opportunity, they've used the opportunity and broadened it so much.
I think the time for talking is over. We want to see a lot of action happen in our lifetime. We don't want this to be something where we've sown seeds and the next generation is going to reap with it. But we want to, the collaborative way is always a way that's going to win.
Meanwhile, the President General, Nigerian Union, South Africa, Ms. Doris Ekeri Solarin, speaks about the challenges facing women in exports and trade.
Another challenge is the issue of the logistics involved in transportation, which is the export and import. So I'm glad one of the top officials of NAFDAC in Nigeria was in this program to explain the processes.
The Nigerian High Commission says that it plans to maintain the momentum after this event and ensure long-term support for women in export and trade. They are of a view that this initiative will fit into the broader economic diplomatic relations between Nigeria and South Africa. From Pretoria, South Africa, Innocent Samosa, Channels Television News.
And that's it on the program today. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.